Hey everybody, Kyle Van Pelt here, and I've got some exciting news. If you've been with us for a while, you know this show as The Connected Advisor. But starting today, we're stepping into a new chapter with a new name, Next Mile. Why the change? Because we believe that progress is never finished. In the world of RIAs, wealth management, and for the future of advice, there is always a next mile. And we at Milemarker want to help you make that next mile your best one. Every day, we work hard to help firms synthesize their data. And by doing that, they unlock growth, streamline operations, and turn complexity into clarity. This podcast is an extension of that mission. It's the same host, same honest tactical conversations, but now with a name that captures the momentum we're all chasing. Change is coming fast. In this industry, you've heard everything there is to hear about AI, how fast M&A is happening, new expectations from clients and your teams alike. So this show, Next Mile, is your space to get real insights, hear from the people that are building the future and what's next, and to stay ready for whatever is next around the bend. We are grateful that you've been here on this journey with us the entire time, but we're just getting started. So let's hit the road. Let's enjoy every mile, and let's get you ready for the next mile. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Next Mile. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder at Milemarker. And today I am joined by an industry friend who is just chock full of great insights, not to put him on the spot or add a bunch of pressure. Probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but today I'm joined by Brian Shenson. Brian's a managing partner and COO at Rise Growth Partners, and he's a dabbling guitarist who, legend has it, he may be taking travel guitars on his next hike to dabble on the trail. Brian, thanks for joining the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. Great to be here and great to be with you.
Of course. I'm glad to have you. I'm sure this is going to be a good conversation. All right. So I ask everybody the same first question, and then we're going to get in and we're going to start talking about Rise. We're going to talk about what you're doing and then your time in the space. But my first question for everybody is effectively about how they got into the industry. But what I've found, Brian, is everybody has a unique path. I've done a lot of these conversations on air, off air, and some people's path is traditional. Maybe they followed family footsteps and they ended up in this space. Some people didn't even know this industry existed and they ended up in the side door after having a whole other career before they came here. But what I've found is whether your path is traditional or untraditional, everybody has what we call a money moment. And that's that moment in your life where the light bulb went off and you said, this is it. This is what I want to do for my career. This is how I want to invest my time. So Brian, what was that money moment for you that led you to where you're at today having this conversation with me?
Yeah, so I think, probably a little bit of an traditional route. I came into this business really through a technology lens before I got into financial services and found a great home working with advisors, cut my teeth, helping build internet startups and developing, advanced technologies at the time when the internet was just coming online. So date myself a bit. And luckily, had the good fortune of landing a software product management job at Schwab in their advisor services business unit. And I came into that role because I was fascinated by database technology and large scale data problems and kind of helping businesses solve and build value around those capabilities. And lo and behold, there was an opportunity at Schwab to work on the portfolio management system that many advisors use. And it was a great starting point for me in this industry because I really got to grow up with the blossoming of the advisor tech community and the entire ecosystem that's been built around the advisor's business. But that was sort of my entry point, is really coming in with a technology and a marketing background to build solutions for advisors. And then through that experience, Kyle, really got to love this industry. I mean, just the dynamics of change and innovation that the independent model brings, the opportunity to have the capacity and capabilities of Schwab to help invest in solutions for advisors, and really recognizing at the end of the day, it's kind of solving both the needs of the individuals working in these advisory firms, helping them have better tools, better success doing their jobs, while also creating value for the end clients in the industry that are served so well by the independent community. So that was sort of my business and professional path. But I'd say to your point about the money moment, I've always had sort of an attention and an understanding of the importance of money, money management. And I think that really has been something that probably I didn't recognize when it happened. But in a fairly early age, when I was in high school, my father passed away, and we had a pretty significant transformation within our own family around what it means to manage money in a very different set of circumstances. And, at that time, I was in a position to, really lean in and help my mom kind of get organized around expenses and tracking. And I have a little bit of maybe an OCD quality of tracking and management and, data attention. And I've sort of brought that with me through my entire life about, thinking about money, forecasting our own financial needs within the family. And so sort of had a bit of a professional and a personal parallel all along. But my path in here was really just by trying to build innovative technology for people that I really care about. And it's really stuck because it's an incredible community to be a part of. And I've really enjoyed both the relationships I've built, like with you and so many others in the organizations that we've worked with. And it's really become like a second family to be in this advisor community.
Yeah. Oh man. Well said. Well said. I didn't know that about your dad passing away in high school. I mean, what a moment that really changes everything in your life. So, wow, that's impactful. Talk about a money moment right there, man. Wow. Okay. And so you go from building technology at Schwab, and I want to talk about this a little bit too, but building technology at Schwab, you kind of go do your own like consulting thing for a little while, helping people on the tech side, helping manage some things. And then you end up at Rise Growth. I want to talk about a bunch of these things, but for you, where do you want to go? Do you want to talk about the consulting side and what you learned there? Because I think that kind of led you to where you're at with Rise right now. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, look, I had an incredible run at Schwab. I probably spent about 14, 15 years there, having the opportunity to go from building just a purpose-built solution for advisors to having the opportunity to run many aspects of Schwab's platform for independent advisors. And along that journey, what I developed was a really special and unique understanding of how advisors run their business. Most people, I think, in the brokerage and custody world spend their time thinking about the trading and the account management, and all of that stuff is incredibly important for advisors. But in building technology tools for reporting and analysis, and then building integration from those tools into planning tools, CRM tools, I got a really interesting bird's eye view of how do advisors run their business? How do they serve their clients? What are the workflows within those organizations? And when I left Schwab, it just really recognized the opportunity to bring all that knowledge and expertise into the organizations that are struggling with adapting their solutions and creating scale capabilities for their businesses. And so jumped right into consulting, working with a number of advisory firms, fintech providers to help them think about and navigate the space. And it's through that, experience that I, developed really great experience in how to help firms think about change and change management and evolution of their businesses. And equally important for the conversation, it's also where I got a closer opportunity to work with Joe Duran and the team at United Capital, which was a longtime client of mine as a consulting firm. And I helped them build and develop their FinLife offering. So again, through that relationship, got to know Joe and the team there. And we'll come back to how that's relevant getting to Rise. But, my consulting business continued to move along. I think we all know, Kyle, we'd spent some time together those years that, the industry was changing rapidly. We went through rapid recognition of digitalization. We also saw the impact of the pandemic and how that changed work patterns and just the ability to even launch a new business. And so my partner and I, we navigated all that, I think, effectively well. And we had the unique opportunity then of selling ourselves and exiting to Boston Consulting Group to do this same kind of consulting, but on a very different scale and to a very different, set of clients, obviously enterprises, large banks, broker dealers, et cetera. And, for me, that was a really great learning experience because I had thought, I knew wealth. I know I've been working with independents for 20 years. I know exactly what's going on in the RIA space. And then my eyes were wide open into just the diversity and the extent to which financial services is taking place in asset management, in wealth management, banking, insurance. So it was a real kind of tour of duty for me inside Boston Consulting Group, adding value in certain areas, but just taking in so much of what the industry has to offer. But as things turned out, I kind of missed the opportunity to be with the independent space. Joe was getting Rise off the ground. He was seeking someone to come in and help think about technology and platform issues and the implications of how all this technology supports advisory firms, and invited me to join as part of the Rise Growth Partners opportunity. It's been an incredible kind of bringing together all of my product experience, my knowledge of advisors, and just my love of this industry to help build and shape great firms for the future. So I couldn't be happier to have landed at Rise and be a part of an incredible team there, both innovating in the industry and also helping innovators achieve their goals.
Man, well laid out. And we're going to talk about Rise quite a bit because I think it's this wonderful convergence of RIA, kind of being built with a blank canvas, because I think everybody loves to talk about, if you had started this from a blank canvas, what would you do? Technology platform, visionary leadership. There's a lot to talk about there, but I want to double click on two things from what you just said before we jump into Rise. I actually think I want to start on your tour of duty. So most of the people that I talk to on this podcast kind of go the opposite route. Maybe they were in a captive environment and they go independent because they see it. You went from the independent side into what people would probably call more the captive, side of things or whatever. A lot of times we talk about the technology in the independent space, but the technology is quite impressive in some of these larger places and things like that. I mean, what were some of the key learnings you did get from that tour of duty about how these people that maybe get thought about differently in the independent space, but yet they are still giants in this industry when it comes to what's happening and what's going on?
Yeah, I'd say it strikes me as the captive space. I think this is not a new story, Kyle, but what I really saw was there's such a desire to learn and copy the innovations in the independent space because the independents are moving very fast. They're trying things, they're breaking things. Risk is, still huge, I'm sure, in the context of an independent firm, but in the grand scheme of things, a lot more opportunity to tinker, evaluate, and even just the M&A activity is creating combinations of experiences within firms that are leading to new outcomes that are working in some cases and really become best practice models. On the other hand, these institutions have finally figured out what they should be doing. It probably took them a little longer than many people would think. Like, why are you not paying attention to what's going on? But as the technology and the capabilities have become more exposed to those in the captive markets, they're getting smarter and thoughtful about turning their incredible resourcing, their incredible capital base, and their ability to attract talent, quite frankly, and really begin moving the needle. The initiatives are certainly large and more complicated, as I have that experience working inside of Schwab, which is a big organization, and moving big organizations quickly on innovation can be challenging. But I think we're starting to see some momentum that's really starting to happen in the wealth space. And I would say, just kind of back to my own story there, I think it was a really good trajectory for the captive market to begin going down that path. And then, macro environment changed radically with the interest rate crisis and banks and firms that are normally very comfortable, I'd say, with their core businesses and able to be more experimental or thoughtful about the wealth opportunity, which is important, but also still small in the grand scheme of things for these organizations. There was a really quick pivot away from wealth, and it became balance sheet management, retaining the advisors they do have, protecting their brands, managing liquidity. And I think that's going to create some more runway for the independents in the short term. But the people I talk to in some of the largest organizations, they have hundreds of people working on problems like AI and data integration. And I think, the size of the investment and the impact is something that I think many independents can't even fathom, quite frankly, the amount of attention and resourcing that's going into these problems.
Okay, that's a perfect seg into the other thing I wanted to double click on. In your consulting business, you talked about how, at Schwab, one of the things and the impetus that led you to going and doing it was trying to help firms be more adaptable, be flexible, things like that. And I've always found this to be this very interesting thing, which is the independents have paralysis of choice, right? The Kitces map has gone from like 150 options to I think close to 500 now in just the past couple of years, lots of specialized tools, things like that. But then when you look at the big captive places like we're talking about, they've built a fully integrated singular workstation that is theirs, right? They might be using third-party tools or things like that. They've done that. I think about ClientWorks at LPL. I think about the Morgan Stanley Advisor Workstation. I think about what Edward Jones has done. And everybody's going to have differing opinions. But my thinking, and I guess my ultimate question is, okay, it's easy to dismiss those large places and say, yeah, Morgan Stanley's got an 8-9 figure tech budget. Of course, they can build this fully integrated thing with hundreds of people, et cetera, et cetera. But yet, the guy who started Rise, you helped them build FinLife, which I think was kind of inspired by sort of this concept and idea.
Yeah.
I think the ultimate question is, why do we not see more RIAs attempting to kind of have their own owned experience, right, that has tools that power it underneath, and they tend to deal with this lack of adaptability, and they're just having to deal with whatever they're given by the technology they have? when the most successful firms out there have really given themselves so much flexibility on the platform that they give to advisors?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kyle. It's one I think that, Joe and I talk about a lot because we're pretty perplexed. We think about what the landscape is using FinLife as a benchmark. It's still pretty cutting edge compared to where the industry is. And it's 10 years old, if not more, in terms of its, origination and impact on the market. I mean, it's been quite a while since United Capital developed it. Obviously, the sale to Goldman Sachs was probably 4 or 5 years ago. So I think one is, it's hard, just to be clear, it's really hard to build these capabilities. Two, I think to Joe and the United Capital team's credit, like they were very disciplined around, and Joe uses this phrase a lot, about building the Navy. How do you get everyone to think consistently around delivery of client experience? How do you get consistency and scale across what might feel like a lot of underlying independent teams working under a common brand? But there's actually real intentionality that goes into integrating and aligning these teams. And I think many firms in the industry have, for whatever reason, decided not to do that hard work. That it's easier to roll up firms, to stick a brand on them, maybe do some integration of the team structures. But having been in the trenches on consulting, I know how hard it is just to integrate a single team, let alone to do it at scale. 15, 20 acquisitions a year, which is probably a high watermark for what some of these roll-ups and aggregators are doing. But until you build that mechanism and that machine, it's very hard to actually create consolidated outcomes across these firms, which makes an investment in a common platform really worth it. So no doubt the broker-dealers have more experience in command, control, and consistency. So they've been in a much better place to actually get the ROI on those large investments. I think it's changing, and we can talk more about this, I'm sure, in the conversation. I think as we see the consolidated capabilities of these major platform players like Envestnet, Orion, and others, it's creating a need now for more adaptability and underlying integration across those tools. But we're going to talk in our conversation around middleware as being an unlock to actually creating these incredibly delightful integrated experiences, but not being reliant on a single tool provider or a single vendor, which is hard to contemplate, I think, for many independents.
Yeah, well said, man. I mean, I was chuckling when you were talking about they go out and they roll up a firm and go from there. I mean, this is what we see every day at Milemarker. I know you know this, but the firms that come to us have acquired a handful of firms. And with those firms, they've acquired now 2, 3, 4 different portfolio management systems. They've chosen to not integrate all of those into one system because they want those firms to still feel a sense of independence. It doesn't change that firm's operating path, but the executives running the firm getting reporting across their entire business now is borderline impossible, right?
It's very hard.
So difficult to think about that executive experience of now I'm multi-platform, I'm multi-custodial, I'm multi-investment solution. How do I actually view what's going on in my business? And nobody thinks about how hard that is, right? They just think, we got to grow. We got to get assets. We've got to, that firm's a good fit. Go get them, bring them in, and we'll solve the problems later. It's a really interesting position for the market to be in.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll come into this, I'm sure, in the conversation. This is where RIAs is, I think, such a unique and special place because we are dealing with the spreadsheet opportunity. Like that's where a lot of it starts in private equity and investing is, does the math work? Is there value to be created by combining organizations and integrating them? Like that's one element. But with RIAs, and I think because of our strategy and our attention to getting it right, we're thinking as much about culture fit, platform fit. Those things matter almost as much, if not more, than just the math. Because there's plenty of great firms out there. I know, and there's many great businesses out there to choose from and to think about in terms of acquisition opportunities for any firm. But you got to get those intangibles right too. Otherwise, you create downstream friction, or something I'm sure you and I could talk hours about in technology, what people call tech debt, right? The stuff that doesn't get dealt with, that just sort of builds and builds. And then you wake up one day and you're like, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
We didn't realize that we weren't actually taking care of the housekeeping along the way. It's really messy around here now.
Oh, man. Like I think, and this will probably be a decent segue because I really want to start talking about RISE. I think Joe's perspective on building United Capital, building FinLife, and now it's like he gets a chance to do it again. But when you talk about the tech debt, the thing that I'm so interested in is everybody's trying to run their businesses off of like a household concept now, but all of the core technology they use runs off of an account-based concept. So when you're talking about trying to change that, you can't, I always tell people like asking Envestnet or Orion or Black Diamond to change from an account to a household perspective would be like changing the architecture of a building, right? I mean, it's like everything underneath that is built around the account concept. So now you're trying to move to a household-based concept. And that's why you need something like middleware, or you need something where you can aggregate all of the data and transform it to matter, because it's people don't realize how difficult it would be to just change how everything works in these systems that they run their business on.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I think, we're seeing some future focus, and it's more than just even the data structures and the relationships between the people. The forward-thinking firms and the capabilities that are becoming available to firms are starting to think about the intentionality of the people in the household. These are not just owners and registrations on accounts anymore. They're actually living, breathing humans who have personalities, preferences, biases. And that's obviously been something the planning community spent a lot of time working on and trying to level and sort of enrich where wealth and advisors add value. And, we have a lot of love and support for the CFP community and how that all brings those capabilities and skills to bear in delivering advice. And now you layer that with technology that can anticipate or understand your behaviors, your biases, your intuitions. And that's going to create a really powerful personalized experience. But to your point, Kyle, the tools are not designed to think about the intangibles or the human element that much yet. Those pieces are coming online, and they're going to have to be integrated to the existing infrastructure. And it's going to be hard to get all of that to line up without, connectivity between them that translates data, manages the context, and then serves it up to the right user experiences or data engines and AI engines that can actually do something with that content and create meaningful insights or value for those who are looking at serving a client, reading a report, understanding someone's needs.
Yeah, so good. All right, let's talk about Rise. So I know you hooked up with Joe to kind of go make this thing happen. Was the impetus, hey, there's still an opportunity to build kind of a technology first version of this? Or was it, oh my goodness, there's still so many great firms out there that need to be rolled up and apply a growth strategy, different things, maybe a combination of all of the above, but what led to this business being started?
Yeah, so I think for the core business, let me kind of set Rise in a general sense for you, and now you can go to some of the elements of technology and platform that are unique that we're also developing on top of this opportunity. But I think the original thesis for Rise is there's rapid consolidation and opportunity in the industry, kind of the macro trends I think, many are writing and talking about. And I think to Joe's vision and the team's vision, because Joe is not the only founder here, but it was, an opportunity to help support those firms in their growth journey. And I think, I kind of go to a catchphrase that Joe uses is, want to build kind of partner that he wished he had when he was building United Capital. I mean, it's as simple as that. Someone that can provide guidance and support, but also ensure that the business has independent vision and opportunity ahead of it. And so to that end, what Rise is trying to do is back great entrepreneurs who have great businesses that want to have a meaningful impact on the industry. And we want to provide them with the capital they need to get there, the expertise to support their journey, and to create an ecosystem of support around them that helps them really build impactful organizations that support the industry. That's really kind of what we set out to do. And on top of that, we knew that technology and platform capabilities, among other strengths that we can bring, I'll talk about those too, would be a unique value add to the organizations, both in terms of providing them direction and insight on how to think about those problems and choices, and also to the degree we can solve problems at scale for them that the entire set of portfolio companies we work with, we think that's really value additive to the organizations, and ultimately it creates unique differentiation for Rise. And I can give some tangible examples, Kyle, as we go through this, but generally we think platform and technology is an incredible unlock for value creation. And we want to be right there at the forefront, helping these firms think through that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that too, actually. We're trying to codify this into an artifact or document, but, we have tons of conversations with private equity firms, with people who are acquiring and things like that. And the consensus seems to come back if a firm, sort of has a cloud-based environment, if they have a cloud-based platform, if they own their data, that their enterprise value can increase anywhere between, $700,000 and $1 million for an average sized RIA, which is quite the incentive to go unlock the platform value. And then if they partner with someone like you guys and you're already there, a lot of times these aggregation plays are kind of enterprise value plays, right? How do I get to be a part of a bigger piece of the pie and trade up into that. And now we're all expanding and growing together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're focused on a segment of the market that maybe is loosely described as mid-market. So these are firms that have the ambition and capability to employ and develop and deliver on those concepts, but they don't have the focus, the attention, or the talent on the team to do so, right? They haven't hired a full-time CTO. They don't have a team of engineers or know how to even deploy a team of engineers. So we're really, I think, operating in a part of the market that can, get the leverage from our expertise and our relationships and hopefully shortcut to decisions or capabilities that otherwise would be just, oh, that's an interesting idea I heard at a conference last week. I have no time to deal with that. So we're very excited to kind of, bring that value of our skills and experiences and create kind of the best fractional team that a management team in an RIA could ever get. And we bring that across, technology and platforms is a place that I focus. We have incredible experience in leadership on M&A and acquisitions. We have a great, Terry Colson on the team, and the group that she's assembling has incredible experience helping firms think about scale and client service and centralized operations. So we really bring a full set of experience and know-how that we can kind of isolate and target specific areas within a firm and help them create value there.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Hey, this is Judd Mackerel. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. The things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all of that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well, and we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is judd@milemarker.co, and I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
All right. Well, so where should we take this next? I think we've kind of hit on a couple of different things. I know we could talk about how you guys are thinking about building out that scalable platform. We can talk about the proven track record that you guys have. I'm also interested too in the types of firms that you guys are bringing. I mean, you say mid-market, but some of the firms that I've seen the announcements for RIAs, I would have put in the bucket of kind of these mid-market consolidator. I mean, they were acquiring, they were doing things like that. And then all of a sudden they come and partner with you guys. So I think that's an interesting story too, as well, because you guys have partnered with some larger firms, right? Yeah. It's not that kind of standard one that you would expect to see an RIA platform rolling up. So where should we take this, Brian?
Yeah, well, let's focus there. I think just to describe the kinds of firms we work with, because maybe some of the audience will want to understand, where does RIAs fit and is it a conversation for them? And I think it comes down to sort of the three core things we're looking for in a firm. AUM is sort of a crude measuring stick of success in this industry. So I think we recognize that there's a certain level of scale that comes with the AUM because it supports revenue. And revenue creates capability and capacity to invest in the business and obviously have value in the context of an investment for anyone who's investing in these firms. So there is a little bit of a boundary reality there that we need to recognize, and that's a starting point. But ultimately, it comes down to three criteria. Do they have the right leadership and sort of approach to managing their business? Do they have a great platform in terms of what makes them special or unique, in terms of how they serve clients, serve advisors, and think about the capabilities from client experience to the offers themselves? It's not just tech platform, but it's, the way they think about investing and the way they think about client service and their ability to go and deliver everything from the core of investment management and financial planning all the way to the ancillary services that are becoming more and more common, like estate planning, insurance, tax planning, et cetera. So that's a big element of the platform that we look at. What's the offer? And then third would be growth. What is the capabilities, the ambition, and the capacity for growth? Because firms that have good leadership and good platform and good growth capabilities make a really good fit for RIAs, because we can lean into that and help accelerate what they do and or complement or help create gap closures on things that are maybe new skills. A firm that may have done really good in organic growth, like knows how to market and reach leads, but may have never done M&A before. Well, we can bring that skill and experience and help create that capability with them if that's part of their growth thesis. So just some examples of where we lean into. And so, yeah, sometimes these firms are a little bigger in terms of assets or team sizes. And, we believe that they have the potential to be really 4 or 5 times larger over the next cycle of their growth. And that's where we want to be, is really helping large firms grow and build great brands that, really create hallmarks of the industry.
That's so fascinating, because I think when you talk to a lot of people who are trying to be in the consolidator game or whatever you want to call it, I think the problems they're trying to solve are, how do we make sure we have great leadership? How do we make sure we have a great platform and offer? And how do we grow? So it's interesting that it's like the firms that have already solved those, you would think, hey, we've kind of made it, we're on our way, yet they're choosing to partner with you. And it sounds like in what you said, the reason why they're choosing to go at it with you guys and together, rather than say, hey, we got a good thing here, we're just going to go, is there's a couple pieces here that RISE is going to come and help us round out the offer. And maybe to ask it more pointed or a little bit tongue in cheek is, if they have those 3 things solved, what do they need you guys for? Right.
And I think that's a fair question, Kyle. I think that's where we, the deals that we develop, and we're proud of the firms that we've invested in. It's a long conversation. I mean, it is a conversation of getting to know each other and making sure that both parties feel that it's a good fit, that together we can do more together. And I think no doubt we are, motivated to work with firms that we know probably have the potential to get there on their own.
Sure.
Can they get there with the same degree of certainty of execution, perhaps get to as large or as impactful of an outcome that they might be thinking about? And so we go through a very careful and thoughtful process with them to help them understand their choices. Go it alone, this is what it might look like. Sell yourself out entirely today, maybe for the big check, because today is the opportunity to harvest your investment, or wait and continue to grow. Or bring on a partner like us that brings capital and expertise, and think of the impact it can have on the trajectory, the confidence, the impact it will have on recruiting, on being a great candidate for buying more firms, because you get to really work with great people in the industry. And we are more than able and willing to lean in. And we certainly are doing that with our relationship with Bleakley and Grimes. I mean, we've only been with these organizations for, in the grand scheme of things, a very short amount of time. And yet we've already been able to help them really move the needle and accelerate their own ambition.
So good, man. I love it. Way to take that answer head on. So, okay. One of the things that we see as a trend, I want to talk about technology in that scalable platform bucket. And this can be future stuff. We can kind of combine this with a couple of the conversations. But the thesis that we have at Milemarker that we see a lot is that, if you take the advice product and you break it into 2 things effectively, I would say you break it into advice creation and then advice execution or advice delivery, right? So the advice creation is the advisor sitting across the table from the household. Their circumstances are changing. The advisor needs to be able to understand what's going on with their plan, understand how their portfolio is performing against the plan, and they need to propose recommendations or things that are next on what happens there. But that's a huge piece of what happens. But then you've got to take what happens as a result of that meeting, and it's got to get into the engine, right? Where people are trading, they're rebalancing, they're doing performance reporting, they're updating the plan, they're cranking through all of the execution of the advice that's being created, right? But when we look at technology out there today, we are asking advisors to do advice creation inside of what I would call advice execution platforms, right? You go in, there's 10,000 features, it's confusing. So I think there's a pretty low adoption of a lot of the things out there. And you have this concept of middleware, we have this concept of an advisor experience that they can have, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a little bit of the future that you see for a trend coming, or would you describe it differently? Or how would you think about making that experience for the advisor easier to connect with the household and go from there? And the last comment I would make is I think this is such a great topic, because one of the most powerful things about FinLife and what Joe did there was honest conversations and things like that. I feel like they really separated out what the advisor does when they're sitting across from clients or prospects to how United Capital cranked through what was a result of those honest conversations in the plan.
Yeah, I think a lot to unpack there, Kyle. So let me maybe frame it a couple of places here, because I think I'm totally agreeing with you about this notion of advice creation and advice execution. Like, that's a reality. And, in some ways, maybe using a restaurant metaphor, because I think this is really, very common kind of way of people thinking about building capability or making the food, understanding what food is needed by the customer, someone who's going and actually presenting options and getting the input and moving back and forth to actually get it. And I think the current state and past state has been the advisors have to go into the kitchen and get it figured out. Like they don't have someone that is sort of, here's your options, here's what we can do, and make it really easy to bring out to the client experience. So we've sort of had, cooks in the room of serving, and we've had, servers and service-oriented individuals back in the kitchen trying to get the food out the door. And I think we're seeing more and more separation there, just to use a very simple analogy. And I think these notions of middleware and data connectivity and separation of platforms is going to make it easier for advisors to stay in the advice delivery business and advice execution and advice creation to be handled in a more elegant way through specialized teams, centralized teams, and eventually and increasingly technology-driven bots, agents, and capabilities. And we can talk about how real that is today versus fantasy as we go down that path of technology innovation. But it's happening, and I think we can all kind of recognize it's been happening forever. In some ways, it's not really new. It's just showing up in different ways as the capabilities of these platforms become a bit more specialized and organizations recognize they need to think about scale. On the other side, though, I think what I'm recognizing and having had this experience in the enterprise space is what's really happening in the advisor landscape is the things that the enterprise businesses kind of understand and are moving towards already. And I think of this I know, Kyle, you've got a lot of technology background too. It's really about layer separation. And it's kind of what FinLife did. You have an experience layer, you have a business functionality layer, and you have a data layer at the bottom. I mean, that's pretty simplistic, but that's kind of classic macro architecture for a technology platform. And the separation of all those pieces is what's going to make it really possible for firms to get the kinds of experiences they want, because that their experience is not totally tied to their business functionality layer, and they have separation of data so they can actually make different choices about business functionality as their clients and advisors' needs change. Now, before that was like I got to change everything in my platform. Now you have the ability to do modularity, and it's not impossible to do, but it's certainly not as easy or frictionless as we believe it can and should be. And that's why we think there's an important opportunity to invest in middleware. And I know Milemarker sees that, and there's others out there who recognize you need to build the rails of connectivity between data, functionality, and experience so that firms have the interoperability to actually modularize their platforms and create the experiences that make sense.
Yes, it's so true, man. I mean, that's our conversations every single day, is like trying to help people I mean, I love the way you laid it out as experience layer, functionality layer, data layer, because the reality is the data layer exists today. I've seen 100 times in the past couple of weeks, the industry's drowning in information, but starving for wisdom or something like that, right? Access to the data is not the problem. You used a great analogy of a restaurant. I love that. I've actually used it a couple times myself. The other one that I would use, not as clean energy friendly, but I feel like we've got these reservoirs of data that people have not figured out how to get out of the ground yet, right? And we've got to figure out the techniques on how to get it out and refine it and deliver it.
I'm very optimistic, Kyle, because I think, and I know you guys are innovators here, we feel that we're innovating. This conversation wouldn't have even made sense 3 years ago.
Right.
Now, at least we can have the conversation that people are having a dialogue about these layers and the data integration. I mean, and again, I feel like I cut my teeth on data integration. It was all about, I would bash two point-to-point integrations together just to exchange a handshake, a name, a token, or an identity. And now we're talking about much richer immersive experiences because I think creativity has gotten more expansive, and quite frankly, computing power has just been insane in terms of capability and progression. And, I think most people in the business world tend to forget, Moore's law and just the stacking and evolution and impact. And you wake up one day and you're like, wow, how did that all happen? It's like, well, the technical people were continuing to churn. You just didn't realize what was possible until it all showed up.
I love it. A lot of the firms that we talk to, I feel like you can tell where they're at in their journey, because the first part of the journey is my Excel workbook is breaking when I try to open it, right? The data set's got too big. Okay, cool. We can help you there. The next portion of the journey is my SQL database is not performing the way we needed to because the data sets are getting too big. And then you get into the stuff that we help, which is like infinitely scalable cloud-based platforms that, we can handle billions of rows of data sets with no problem whatsoever, right? It's very interesting to see how people go on that journey themselves, and they would not have been able to describe it that way.
Yeah. I call it the Grand Canyon of the RIA industry, because you can almost look at when a firm was founded, and you can almost anticipate what their tech stack looks like or looked like, and how many evolutions they went through. And again, being in portfolio center business, which is, probably now something that people don't remember existed, but for a time, it was one of the leading providers of data management solutions for portfolios to thousands of RIAs. And it's like, we're going to jump to the cloud version. Now we're going to cloud native. It's just, I remember one of my first projects was going from a B-tree embedded database on a CD-ROM that you'd send to the client. And then we now we're shipping you SQL Server too, so you can run your own data. Then we take it to the cloud. And it's just, these evolutions keep happening. And, today it's AI. I don't know what will be next. And I'm sure AI will be a long running story, but we've already forgotten about blockchain. That's still a very interesting and innovative capability that's playing its course. In preparing for this interview, Kyle, I was thinking about even immersive experiences. We don't talk about virtual reality much anymore, or augmented virtual reality, but it's still being worked on. That's going to show up again in client experience, even though it's not in the headlines today. So we have to keep reminding ourselves that innovation happening in all of these pockets. And then amazingly, businesses and innovators like Milemarker, Joe, RIA, others, we bring these things together, and all of a sudden it's like an aha moment for people. How did that happen?
Yeah, man, it's so true. It's so true. All right. Unfortunately, we're starting to get a little short on time. So we may just have to have you back because there's so much that I still didn't get to cover with you. And I think this has been a jam-packed conversation already. So I think we'll have to get with the team and bring you back for a second interview. But let's kind of go to the two final segments of the show. You're starting to touch on it a little bit there. So it's a good segue, which is I love to ask my guests to kind of get out their crystal ball, look into the future of the advice space and the wealth tech space, and tell me what you see coming. I mean, and there's so much AI, like you said. And then I actually think it's interesting that you just brought up these things that were hot, VR, AR, blockchain, things like that. Sometimes the future takes a little while. So what do you see coming down the pipe that you guys are trying to position and prepare yourselves for at Rise?
Yeah, I think, it's an overtold story. So it will sound probably like you've heard on every one of these conversations, Kyle, but I think the combination of the AI and the data opportunity it's profound. I think we are still in the earliest of innings of understanding its potential. I think we are in the earliest of innings of understanding how work and human contribution to work will evolve. I think people are starting to recognize that AI is not replacing humans, it's augmenting humans.
Yeah.
I think someone made the comment, they should just call it augmented humans rather than augmented or artificial intelligence, because at the end of the day, the winners in this, if it's a race, not that I like to think of this as a race, will be those who figure out how to apply AI capabilities to support them in their work. Yeah. And it's really, something that I think is going to be transformative on every aspect of this industry. At the same time, for those who may feel overwhelmed by it or nervous, I think I've got two pieces of advice there as think about crystal ball. One is just play. I mean, you got to get in there and use it. These things don't make sense theoretically. They kind of do, but until you start engaging with chatbots or doing prototyping or testing lightweight experiences, I don't think it's clear how this stuff will actually change behaviors and experience. So I think that's key point number one. Lots to learn. No outcomes have been written yet, but they will be found by actually tinkering and innovating. The other thing I would say is, and I felt this really coming out of the T3 conference a couple months ago, just the number of solutions out there. And you talked about the KITS FinTech map, and it's overwhelming. The history of this industry seems to be that innovation shows up and then it gets gobbled up, whether it be purchased or just subsumed into larger platforms. So as much as I think everything that's out there from a tooling perspective is worth paying attention to, experimenting, prototyping, and even tackling real business problems with, I think eventually all the stuff is just going to be kind of normalized and integrated into the experience that you're accustomed to. It's almost like we don't think of the iPhone as component pieces anymore, but it used to be a phone, it used to be a camera, but now it's just this integrated experience that kind of runs my life and has everything I need. And so I think we have to be open-minded about the fact that AI feels today very, tools and tangible and this endpoint and this agent, but smart design sort of, I think, and effective design and technology is when the technology disappears.
Right.
And I think we'll get there soon, and maybe sooner with AI, because it has such an incredible ability to be almost integrated into the experience as if it were responding to you in a way that you're used to. And I think it's an unlock when you start to play with it. You realize this thing is just an extension of my experience is really what it is. So that's what I guess maybe not so much the crystal ball, but just sort of, I think, the reality of where we are and what the opportunities present.
I love it. And I love that you gave some tips on, what to do if you're kind of apprehensive about it. Cause I think there are more people who are apprehensive than they think. And that was great. So great answer, great response. And I'm very interested to see what happens too. I mean, because outside of our industry, but really innovative thing is that Shopify just did a deal with OpenAI to where it won't be like an affiliate link out to Shopify anymore. It's like you can basically do the payment flow right within the ChatGPT window or something. So if you're searching for some product and that product is built on the rails of Shopify, like you can check out and do everything from within. And people know this about me, but one of my favorites is Iron Man. And I know everybody's been talking about Jarvis and Iron Man and whatever for the longest time, but when you watch those movies or whatever, he would always have this augmented reality experience connected with AI. So if he needed a visual or he needed to see the readouts, right, you have this heads up display doing it, or it's just talking to him. So AI is only going to continue to go from there, which I think is hyper interesting.
Yeah. I've been to the Minority Report, if you remember that movie.
Oh, yeah. Everything moving around. And that is actually one thing I think is going to be really interesting too, as we go, is everybody continues to think about this on a cloud basis. I do wonder if with AI, it's going to move more back to like you have a server, some small server, like, and I know NVIDIA is trying to do this, but some small server in your house that runs AI or whatever. And then the cloud is still for these tools out here, enterprise, et cetera. But this was somewhat time sensitive, but Sam Altman was just saying that how many millions of dollars they spend computing people saying please or thank you, right? Which is very interesting.
No, I agree. Look, I think we can't underestimate, especially in the financial space, the importance of compliance and data security. I think these are cross currents that is going to force the AI implementations to be, well, maybe it is all in the cloud for compute, but your data is not. I mean, I know certainly, the smart businesses like Rise, we're doing the same. Get people off of the public chat GPTs, protect your data, protect your IP. Like, I think that's the most important thing to remember is this is still all happening in the real world with real world rules, laws, and risks that people need to pay attention to. And that's, I know the smart firms and others are thinking a lot about those issues, and that shows up in responsible AI and data security and data privacy. And those things do not go away just because advisors are clamoring for efficiency with note taking and other obviously important capabilities, but risk management is still a big part of this industry and that has to be thought about too.
Yeah, certainly, man. Oh, I love it. All right. Great conversation so far. Let's move into the final segment of the show, which is what we call the Milemarker Minute, series of lightning round questions, fun, lighthearted stuff for you, meant to get to know Brian outside of the wealth tech industry. You ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll.
Okay. If you could travel anywhere in the world you've never been to before, where would you go?
Oh boy, that's a great question. My wife and I talk about it a lot. She's got a laundry list of places she wants to go. I love international travel. I've had the pleasure of being in some really interesting places. Like I've been to Iceland and Japan, and I don't know. I guess I'd go anywhere because I think anything that's, interesting, but I guess I have a soft spot. I want to go to Patagonia. I mean, I love the mountains. I think that's just a really interesting and beautiful faraway place. But, on a real return basis, my wife and I are actually going to Croatia this fall to celebrate our anniversary. So I guess I'll have to say my next trip is to Croatia.
I love it. That's awesome. All right. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I love history. I'm a huge fan of history and historical context. I'm not really a famous person chaser, so this is not always an easy question for me, but I think I would, put myself in a dinner with people who have had to make really interesting or consequential decisions. So I think of like Abe Lincoln at the time he was navigating, difficult choices in the Civil War, or even like, the night before Harry Truman dropped the bomb. Maybe that'd be an interesting dinner. So, I don't know, facing leaders at moments of tough challenge and, obviously difficult decisions that are weighty.
Yeah. What is the best flavor of ice cream?
Oh, I'm a soft spot for cookies and cream.
Yes, great answer. What's the best book or podcast you've read or listened to in the past year?
Oh, I guess there's two that kind of strike me. One's on the financial side. I really enjoyed The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I just thought it was very useful, constructive, and a very accessible view on money. And it kind of, again, touches on behavioral finance, but in a real and practical way. So that's a book that I would say if anyone needs a primer on how to think about money, it's a great entree. And then another book that I read over the last year that really struck me is Sapiens. I think it's Yuval Harari, just the history of mankind. Again, I have a little bit of a history orientation, and It takes a very big macro view, like everything from the cognitive revolution to the agricultural revolution. And I don't know, I feel like when you get to a place to look at the really long view of history, it helps you realize that your place in it is very small.
I love it. All right, final question. This is our current universe. There's an alternate universe out there that Brian Shenson lives in, but he is not a managing partner and COO at Rise Growth. You do something completely different. What career do you have in this alternate universe?
I always wanted to be a park ranger. I thought that'd be a nice, quiet job.
There you go.
Walk the trails and help some people. And I guess well, maybe they're not hiring now, but I understand they could use some help.
Yeah, I'm sure. Go hang out with Smokey the Bear.
Exactly.
I love it. Brian, we're going to have you back because, again, I have a whole sheet here of stuff that I feel like we didn't get to, but this was still just a jam-packed conversation. It was a ton of fun. Always great to reconnect with you. So thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me and look forward to doing it again, Kyle. Have a great day. Thanks so much,
man. All right, everybody, that's been another episode of Next Mile. Please make sure you click follow or subscribe wherever you're consuming this. And if you'd be kind enough, leave us a review so that people who haven't found the show yet can find great conversations like the one with Brian. And make sure you go check out Rise Growth Partners if you haven't already. We've got their information in the show notes. Great platform. They're thinking about it differently. Something for you to go check out as a result of this. But until the next episode, enjoy every mile.